Okay, so what we're looking at here is P Bass V from Chocolate Audio. Bass guitars, much maligned. People don't pay very much attention to them. They just kind of plod away in the background, people say, and we don't pay much interest in what they do. But actually, a good sampled bass guitar is very useful when composing. So what we've got here is P Bass V. It was the latest thing from Chocolate Audio. Chocolate Audio do lots of other things like pianos and bits and bobs, but P Bass V is their first electric bass. I'll just give a little play and then we'll have a go through the screen and see what the interface has to offer. So it's got some things going on there. It's got some nice legato slides. It's got legato string behavior. It's got a fingered sample set, which we're playing there. It's also got a muted sample set and a harmonic sample set. And we'll go through each of those in depth now. It's got a full effects section, some fairly nice playback and player controls. And you can get really deep down into the effects engine and program a lot of stuff in and make a lot of choices about how it plays. So let's just look at the first window first. This is the startup window where you've got a choice of which bassist you're using. It also tells you which note it's playing, which string it's playing that note on, which fret it is using to play said note, and the articulation it's playing at the time, whether it's just a standard finger or whether it's a slide or a pull on or a pull off. You can control which bass you're playing by rotating this knob, and you can assign that knob. It's already assigned to 84, but you can assign it to any CC to flip through nice and quickly. Down the bottom here, you've got your playback engine, where you select whether you're going to be fingered, mute, or harmonics. What we heard there was the fingered. You've got a mute. And then you've got harmonics. And this bass has full release samples and a whole load of other stuff going on. So we'll go back to the finger. In the behavior you've got here, you've got either monophonic, and what it is, it's monophonic per string. So you'll notice there, if I go from a D to a G, I can play a harmony because the D is the D string and the G is a G string. If I go from E to A, it'll do the same. But if I try to go from G to B, it does it in monophonic because the G string is being used to play the same note, which is quite nice to have a monophonic string behavior like that. You've also got legato string behavior, and this allows you to do slides. So for instance, if I go from D to G, it slides up. That's a bit strange. If you notice here, it's sliding from string D to string G. Now, how can you slide from one string to another? But anyway, but we'll talk about slides in a bit. And then you've got polyphonic, which just gives you a fully polyphonic bass guitar. So let's leave it on legato for the moment, because that's the one I tend to use more than others. On the side here, you've got a very quick, easy switch on and switch off for compressor, EQ, distortion, various modulations, which you can choose between chorus, flanger, phaser, etc. Amp modeling, delay, and a cab modeling. So without them, it's quite with the compressor. And we've got shove them all on. Anyway, Anyway, we won't go there. So you've got lots of stuff you can play with there. At the very top here, you've got a simple kind of tilting tone knob to choose. Let's put the compressor and the amp, the cab, back on again. And we've got a nice high tone to a dark tone. In fact, you can probably hear me using the keys more than the bass. So that's quite nice having that tone. And then over here, you've got a master gain which supersedes the gain on the instrument itself, which allows you to control the gain of the actual sound. So that's the easy menu. And to be honest, if you're just playing around, you could just do it on that screen. So what else does it do? Well, in the playback window, you've got control over what legato does. So you've got, interesting, on the easy, you've got mono, legato, or poly. Click that to mono, go to playback. These are the same settings. So look, poly, poly. So easy window gives you access to some of the settings. These three windows give you access to more settings. So don't get confused by switching this to legato and then going here and going, why is that? Of course, it's legato, it's supposed to be. You then got a choice about the legato strength. And if you listen to two notes, that's soft. You can hear the attack is a little bit tighter. What it's doing is it is cutting the sample, the start of the next sample, a little bit shorter, so it hits the transient a bit quicker. A little click you can hear there is that sample being cut shorter. So to be honest, somewhere between soft and mid-soft tends to sound quite nice. You can set your sustain pedal to either switch from legato or switch to slide. That's quite a useful thing. And then down the bottom here, you've got your vibrato control. I tend to leave it on aftertouch. I've got a nice aftertouch control keyboard. It's not a great in-depth vibrato, even set on maximum depth. I'll just play a note. You know, you've got a bit of vibrato. They've done it quite nicely too. So if I play a D string, I'm trying to apply vibrato, and it won't let me because it's playing the bottom fret or the open string. Therefore, it can't do vibrato on that string. So that's quite nice. You can do that, and you can control vibrato speed. Make it really nice and slow. Ridiculously slow or really quick. So you've got some control over that, and all of these, of course, they're in Kontakt. You can right click and learn the automation for each of these and assign them to pedals or whatever. So that's the vibrato. Then up here is the slide. You noticed before if you do slow legato between notes, it does slide. Play quickly and slightly disjointed, it doesn't play the legato, it doesn't play the slide. So the slide is controlled here. There's two slides, a duration A slide and a duration B slide. By default, the duration A slide is a slower slide than duration B slide. So if I set this down so the velocity controlling duration A is around 67 and the tempo is about 120, you can hear that's a slow slide. Hit it a bit harder, it slides quicker. So you can set this slide really very slow, let's say to a 1/2, and then a fast slide. So if you're playing hard, you could actually set your duration B slide to something like a 30-second triplet. So you don't even notice it, it's just a legato. Play it gently, it plays a much longer slide. So that's actually quite fun. Set that to something like a 4th. You can get some nice little slides. Of course, it's a fretted guitar, so you can't get that fretless slide. It's a fretted slide. But that's actually really quite nice. If you're used to playing with a certain type of velocity, you can set this velocity to somewhere around where you're comfortable. You're not preset into where you have to do these slides. Get used to it. That's really good. So that's the slides. In the next window, you've got control over the player. So this is the left hand, in other words, the fretting, and the right hand, in other words, how hard you're pulling on or plucking the strings with your finger. The left hand is fairly clever. You can select which fret you prefer to play around. So if I choose fret 7, you can see here, it's always playing above fret number 7. Go down to 0. It plays anything from 0 upwards, and go all the way up to strange things like jazz 1 and things. You'll see it's choosing a fretting type that is more jazzy, so it's slightly further up the neck. And you can do the same pump with pop or funk, and it chooses a type of fretting that it makes it sound a little bit more tight, like a funky string, because it's playing higher up the neck. So that's quite a useful thing to have. And you've got this option down the bottom to extend a string. If you think about it, the way that the computer is doing the maths for this bass playing is it's working up from a G string, for instance. It hits a D and goes, oh, I'm going to switch to a D string there. That's logical. Well, you may actually want your G string to be extended. So you can extend your G string. So it's G. So everything above a G is now all the way on the G string. So if you're doing those kind of funky bass lines where you want to just stay on one string, you can do that. Or you can turn that off completely. That's actually really quite nice. If you extend the B string, for instance, it extends the B right up. So that's actually quite a fun function for doing kind of guitar solos. And again, you can automate that. And then on the right-hand side here, you've got the player. So that's the right hand. That's what's doing the picking. It's assuming this is a right-handed bass player, of course. You've got repetition. You've got minimum repetition time. It automatically does an alternating left-right. Sorry, up-down. If you listen carefully, you can hear it going up and down. If you put it onto maximum, that's the same bass sound. And you can choose various millisecond times in between. So if you're playing a slow rock ballad, you may not want it to do alternating up and down fingerings or whatever. So that's quite nice to have that. You can have miss hits so that you never miss a pluck. You can set the miss hits. So if you're playing too quickly or too slowly, it plays a duff note. That's quite nice to do. And then you've got a velocity curve over here from all the way up to compressed to exponential, where it makes it really hard to play anything sensible. And then in the little window above here, you can choose which type of velocity you want. So for instance, I'm choosing the FF samples throughout the whole range, so it's just sounding in your face. You can choose FF and MP, or you can choose the entire range. It doesn't save on sample loading. It's tiny anyway. And you've got ghost down the bottom here. Just hear that. Just touching the string. You can change these velocities quite easily just by dialing them up, and it'll then change them accordingly. So it's actually a really useful interface. There's so much on just a bass guitar here, so much more than other instrument manufacturers have even put on really quite complicated multi-harmonic, multi-sample instruments. So they've done a lot of effort to make this sound good, and it does sound very good. And then finally you've got the engine control, which allows you to play various samples at different volumes. So you've got control over string noise, slide noise, those release triggers you heard earlier, the harmonics levels, the apoggia, Vibrato, no idea what that is, and other effects. I'll look that one up. You've then got control over the length of the sustain, the release trigger decay, so how long the release trigger lasts for, and any string noise. You can either have short, mid, long, or random string noise, so it kind of adds a bit more randomness to the guitar, giving it a lot of realism actually when you play it. So that's going through those 4 menus on the playback window. And then right down the bottom here, you've got the effects button, which essentially, if you go to the front and you turn these on and off, all you're doing is you're turning on and off the effects in this window here. You've got compressor with a very simple compression and release function. You've got distortion with drive and the amount of direct. You've then got an amp, dark, bright. There's not really amazing choices of types of amp. This is not an amp modeling simulator. This is just a simple bit of amp. And then you've got your cab, and you can choose what kind of speakers you've got. You can choose what kind of microphone you're using. You can see some names there you might recognize. And then you can choose where you want your microphone, and then mix between cab and DI. And all these sliders are quite nice because they're actually very broad sliders. You can see the movement of a mouse is far more than the sliders moving. So you've got some fairly good fine control over most of these controls. The EQ is a little bit basic. We've got bass, mid and treble, and I'm not altogether sure where the frequencies are for those 3. And then modulation, you can choose between chorus, flanger or phaser. The phaser is actually quite good. Let's turn that rate right down. That's lovely. So you've got chorus, flanger, phaser, and then you've got a delay. Go back to your muted bass. Lovely. And turn that off. And at the end here, you've got your output master. Let's put this back to minimum. Go back here and you'll see this is linked to this master control here. So when you turn the compressor on, you may have to boost it a little bit using this master to get the right effects. So that's the way the engine works. You've heard what it sounds like. It's a really good bass. You can quite simply just load it into Kontakt and dial up one of these presets. They've got some great ones, some warm DIs, muted warm, low and mean, funky hard, etc., etc. And each one of these goes through and chooses different articulations and different fretting crossover styles, different velocity ranges and everything. So it's a really good bass. It's not very expensive. If you're looking for extra basses, you can never get enough really in the bottom end. So have a look at Chocolate Audio B Bass V.